Well, I am already such a big fan of Black Cake. I've really been enjoying what I've seen so far. So, just to start off, I would love to know what kind of made you want to get involved in the series and create this television adaptation.
Well, I'm glad you like it. That's important. I read the manuscript in the fall of 2020, and it was actually sent to me as a consideration for a feature adaptation. And like when I finished the final word on the final page, I called my agent and I said, I absolutely want to do this, but it is not a movie. It is a television show. It's too deep, too rich, too complex to do in 2.5 hours. So I just immediately wanted to meet Charmaine Wilkerson, the author, talk to her a little bit about it and tell her, my point of view and my take. And luckily, we got along really well. We collaborated with Harpo and Capitol Productions, where I'm at with my deal, the studio, and we pitched it out to the world. And Hulu was the perfect home for it, and they just got it immediately. And I'm so proud of everything everyone has done to execute it because it was very, very tough gig.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously there are always differences between, a book and an adaptation, but was there anything in particular that you really wanted to make sure you preserved from the original story?
I wanted to preserve so much, and we did. And I think people will see that. We change things, we reveal things at a different pace. I love the characters. I love the world. I love the timeline. I love this young woman running for her life. And I would never acquire a book to adapt and only to dismantle it. And I don't really understand why anyone would do that. So I wanted to preserve so much. And I look at the changes in the adaptation really expanding when necessary, when things are summarized, or condensing or combining. If characters are too separate and their stories are in different worlds and we need to get them together, like Byron and Benny, for instance. So those changes are really just about making them closer, putting her in LA instead of New York, just to keep their stories closer together, but preserving, Charmaine's original intentions and who the characters really are at their core. That was always a mandate for me.
Well, how much did, character descriptions and things like that end up playing into the actual casting of the series?
Well, Covey, a half Chinese, half Jamaican 18-year-old girl as the main character of the book is, a half Chinese, half Black young actress, 18-year-old. Well, she was at the time, right after we cast her. So that was so important. Eleanor, obviously finding someone to portray the older version of Covey, and we found Chipo Chung to portray the older version of Mia Isaac. Those were all really important. But we also had to really think about who was the best person for the job, because there are a couple characters in the book who don't necessarily match the physical description, Benny and Mr. Mitch, who are actually both portrayed by people who starred on my last show. And we just knew we wanted to get the absolute best actors for the roles. And I actually spoke to Charmaine and I asked her if there was ever going to be a big departure in terms of casting. I asked her if she was comfortable with it, because it's so important to me that she loves this and is proud of it, because I love the book so much.
Well, I actually had a chance to speak with Natalia, the director of the first 3 episodes. So I would love if you could just give some insight into collaborating with her and what you kind of wanted to bring from the page to the screen in those first 3.
Well, the first 3 they're epic. It was such a massive undertaking for Natalia. I was literally just texting with her like 5 minutes ago. And I didn't know her, so for us to work together, not knowing each other, I met her, I'd watched her work. I really liked the edge that she would bring to this show, because there's so much heart and so much love and romance. And I said, if it ever feels too sweet, I want you to slice through it, because I still I want this to be cinematic, and I want there to be an edge to this. And I really thought that she brought that, especially to episodes 2 and 3. And the collaboration, it was like any, relationship where, okay, it's like you're dating kind of, or like, okay, like trying to figure you out. And then once you're in it for a while, you just sort of, you're just really brutally honest with each other in order to just get stuff done. And luckily, we continued working together throughout the post process, and really just tonally, we're really looking for the same thing, performance wise, looking for the same thing. So it ultimately turned out to be a really great collaboration on a very complicated, project. Those first three hours though are so great. I love them so much. They're such a great introduction to the series to really show the audience how big this show is, but how character driven it is at the same time. And that we're going to take you all over the world, and you never know when or where you're going to be at the beginning of any given episode. And I think her work perfectly sets up the series.
Well, I really enjoy the multiple storylines going on. I mean, you have the present day, and then you also have, Covey's story in the past. So, I was curious, how did you really want Covey's story to feed into her children's relationship with each other?
I wanted it to be dramatized in a surprising way, meaning that I didn't want to do like very sort of overt parallel stories where Covey was going through some, experiencing racism at work at the same time, but Byron is as well. That is one way to do it, a sort of more traditional way. I just wanted it all to be part of a larger story where we do see that Covey in episode 3, for instance, experiences some discrimination at work, and Byron is also experiencing those things in other episodes, and it all is connected and it's all meticulously mapped out. But I wanted it to be woven through in a subtler way, just so that we weren't feeling like we're, teaching a lesson or just telling a story, because it all goes back to these ancestral ties, and the generations before us and the things they went through affect us in present day. And I wanted to just show that through the storytelling versus telling that through the dialogue and the characters, like making all those connections. Because if you watched all, you'll see that so much of what Covey experiences in her past, it's a reflection of how her children are in present day. And now that they know all of this and they've learned so much, they can either, right some of those wrongs of the past or heal some of those wounds and find each other closer together, or they can, blow up their lives. It's really up to them now that they have all of this amazing information and all the stories of how they came to be, really.
Well, with Covey's story taking place in the 60s, did you work with, the production designer and the wardrobe department specifically on anything to really capture that time period?
Yeah, our amazing art department, costumes, hair, makeup. We are in so different years, different countries, different decades. And so the clothes had to really reflect the time and place, no matter what. And I wanted Covey and Bunny specifically, my sort of guidance to our costumes department was, I want them to be cool and to be aspirational, and they should look cool. Like, this shouldn't feel down. They're middle class. And I want to see that reflected in that particular country and that particular time period. And our amazing costume designer, Haley, she just creates, each world has its own color palette. And so our costumes department works with our production designer, who works with our DP. And so there's a palette for every timeline. There are palettes for every country. And you'll see, if you look closely or second watch, you'll see that the way LA in present day looks is very different than Scotland in 1971. And so much thought and planning, meticulous thought and planning, and money was put into it to make sure we were being accurate, but also, giving. Covey has style, so she should have style in, the majority of the scenes where we see her.
Well, I saw that you were actually heavily involved with The Fosters, and that is a show that is, really rooted in family and, familial bonds. I am curious, do you feel that work kind of transfers over to what you've done with Black Cake at all?
That was my first staff writing job 10 years ago. And it's my personal story. I'm adopted, and my parents were foster parents. And so having that life experience was obviously a huge selling point in me getting staffed on that show, because I lived it. I actually, I know what it's like to be an adoptee, and I know what it's like to be an adoptee and then to have new brothers and sisters overnight and move into your home, and then to be part of a very unique family of people who all came, from, different families to make one family. So that comes from me and my personal experience and where I grew up. And then that obviously that's just inherent to who I am. That goes into, everything that I do. This sort of, I think the themes of, you sort of finding your people and this sort of accidental family and these people who come together and they're from different walks of life, but they're all, after the same thing. That definitely comes from my personal experience and my particular family.